Hello and welcome to another session of Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and these are my colour conversations. In this session, we'll be looking at the colour pink, the most recent basic colour term that we know of. It's a colour that is either highly appealing or it can actually be highly distressing for those people who have to deal with it as both a physical colour and also as a personality type, which we will be looking at a later date in a different session. But firstly, let me welcome those of you who have been following this series of sessions, and you are very, very welcome. I'd like to thank the new subscribers for coming in and joining us. But I'm still lacking those comments at the bottom of each session, which let me know just how you feel about what it is that I've been talking about, and if you've got any other comments or even refutations to make about what I claim. If you're new here, you are also extremely welcome. If you would like to, hit that subscribe button and join in with us, because you never know, you can always learn something new or different, depending on how you look at it. All right then, well, let's get started. And here we have it, pink, the most recent colour. Let's have a quick overview of what I'll be discussing today. Firstly, I'll look at the features of the colour as they arise, and then I'm going to look at pink as it exists in nature. Then we'll look through the journey of pink as it becomes a basic colour term, and then a little bit about the history of the colour pink itself. Then what cultural uses it can be put to and has been put to over time. And then finally the effects of pink, both positive and negative, but we're also going to look at the idioms that are associated with pink to see how they fit with our cultural expectations. Beginning with the features of pink. It's relatively common as a colour in nature, but as a natural colour, it's basically been seen as either a light red or a light purple. People haven't always considered it to be a colour in its own right. It's very elusive in that it was a very unstable dye until modernity, where we started to create artificial dyes. It's got fluctuating likability though, and that depends on where the particular culture is looking at the colour pink and how it feels about it at any given time. It has pale shades to very vibrant hues, as you can see here, and its symbolism also varies across different cultures and religions. But despite all of this, it has retained a certain popularity in fashion for a very long time. It's also used for behavioural control, and we'll be looking at that later in this session. One of the things that we find with the colour pink is that it has no position on any of the colour wheels. If we have a look at this one, which is the red, blue, yellow colour wheel that we are all taught as children, this is the one that has to do with mixing of colours as actual things that we play with in reality. It's called a subtractive colour because it removes spectral light. That is, it reflects only those lights that are not absorbed. So when we have yellow as a pigment, it means it has absorbed all of the other colours of the rainbow in white light and only reflects yellow. The same goes for red and the same goes for blue. And that's how we create other mixtures of colours. The other system that has a similar sort of way of putting colour together on a page is the cyan, magenta, yellow and black combination. Now this is the one you're probably familiar with because it belongs to our printing systems with our computers. It too offers three colours as a basis, but this time instead of blue and red, we go for cyan and magenta as the two main colours. And the difference is that we also add black, which allows the colours to have a variety of shades, darker and lighter, depending on how much black we incorporate. So we have to ask ourselves, how is it actually defined? Well, in nature, we have a number of inanimate objects. We have rocks that we build things out of. The granites are often contain little pink deposits within the structure, and marble also has an ability to contain a fair amount of that same coloration of pink. Sandstone is another one of these rocks that can be anything from a yellow through to a bright reddish orange, but pink is also a fairly common colour. Then we have any variety of rocks that we don't use for building, and these are generally the gemstones, and there are quite a variety of them. And then we get into the plant world, and here we have any number of flowers. The ones that are mostly in pink that we recognise easily are, of course, the roses, but there are many others that are available. Dianthus is another one, which is more commonly known as the pink flower or pinks, and then we have columbines, which are nearly always pink as well. As well as that, we also have fruits that are available in various shades of pink. Presented here, we have the dragon fruit, the pomegranate, and also the pink grapefruit. But these are just 3 out of many different fruits that can be classified as belonging to the pink variety. Vegetables too can be seen as pink. We have here radishes and sweet potato, and also a variety of pink that is more into a purple, but nevertheless still classified as pink, which is a cauliflower. And of course, some of us actually also like to recognise pink fungi. There are quite a variety, an enormous variety of pinks within the fungal communities. And one thing that doesn't actually occur in nature but is important are the processed foods, which, when they are linked to sugar and sweetness, tend to be coloured pink. In the animal world too, we have quite a number of different pink varieties. Aquatic, we can have cichlids, which are freshwater fish, often kept in personal aquariums. We have starfish, and we also have pink dolphins, mainly from Thailand. Birds too can be seen as having a lot of pink. The galah, which is an Australian bird, the flamingo, and then of course the rosefinch, are all birds coloured brightly pink. Insects such as the locust, the moth, and the butterfly also can be seen as having pink varieties. And then we have reptiles. There's a little pink lizard that lives in deserts. There's the gecko, which often is a pink variety living in and around human habitations. And we also can see pink snakes on occasion. Then, of course, there are the bigger terrestrial animals, the pigs, which often are pink, the alpacas, and a variety of albino elephant, which has little pink babies. So moving on to pink as it became a basic colour term. It's the most recent basic colour term in English specifically, dating from only the 1600s. In antiquity, there was no name for pink. Around 800 BC, Homer talked about rosy-fingered dawn, which is very similar to the colours that are put here in this particular image, although they certainly didn't have the same sort of skyline. The word pink itself originally referred to the frilly edge of flowers, and that word continues today in the use of pinking shears, which are specialised scissors that have a zigzag edge on them, creating a zigzag pattern on anything that is cut with them. In the 1450s, pink hues were classified amongst the yellows. And when we see this image here, you can see how very close a lot of those pinks develop into yellow. And that's not necessarily surprising because in very primitive languages, the words for yellow and red are synonymous. Later on, however, the word pink began to be linked to objects, specifically to flowers. So it was finally named in the 18th century. It became rose, rosa, in French, German, or Italian. And Pink for the dianthus species was the name that was adopted in English. Of note is that not all Asian cultures had a word for the color pink. In fact, the Chinese have no word for it even to this day. The word they use actually says foreign color. So let's now trace pink's use through ancient art. In antiquity, in prehistoric times, pink was basically a faded red ochre rock, and it was seen as cave paintings. We don't know whether or not there were actually any shades of that red ochre that differentiated the red from the pink varieties. Certainly, it was a long time ago when these were painted, when these were put on the walls, and we really do not know very much about them at all. In Mesopotamia, they used red limestone and marble mosaics to create their images, and often the marble was pink marble, and so you can see pink being used, although they didn't necessarily have a word for it. In these images, males tend to be more orange in appearance than females. This continued through into Egypt, where the pinks were mainly seen as pale browns. In Greece, they were mainly pale orange browns, and that was due to a mixture of lead, white, bone white, and red ochre that was used for those paintings. In Pompeian wall art, which is probably the most brilliant that we have from that era, we can see that brownish yellow with a hint of red was the color that was used for skin. Females, like in Mesopotamia, always had a lighter tone for skin, and they were a little bit more pink. And we can see that specifically when we look at the paintings that they did on the walls of nude people. In Rome, pink wasn't a very popular color. However, a lot of the bricks, which contained red, orange, and pink clay, were then put together in patterns that give the illusion of pink buildings. And across the world around the same time, in the nations that practiced Hindu, the pink itself was a color that was recognized and was associated specifically with gods and ascension, and Lakshmi, the goddess of fertility, was one that was particularly associated with the color pink. Pink had a very late start in terms of European art. In the medieval era, an iron manganese firing of glass enabled the glassmakers to create a pink color. Black animals, because black was considered to be a color associated with the devil, were often portrayed as being pink in the glassworks that they created. Pink is associated with ascension in this form, and so we often find saints clad in pink, along with the use of pink in other items, such as images of Christ, even though Christ's color was primarily white. There's no pink in heraldry at all, so that was one major area of color use in the medieval period that completely ignored this color. By the Renaissance, in the 14th to 17th centuries, they had developed the ability to create a pink dye, and this came from the discovery of Brazil wood plantations, which of course came from the New World. Here, the Brazil wood's outer bark was removed and the inner bark shavings taken off and then processed to create a dye that gave a variety of different pinks depending on the dye process. By the 14th century, pink began to have a bit of an elevated status. Here, it was a color that was associated with nobility or with a change in a person's status. So if you were bringing down a king, for example, and raising your own status, then you could be designated the color pink as a symbol of that. As well as this, there were certain nobles within that period who also favored pink as a major color in their particular livery. and also in their own personal clothing. By the end of the 15th century and into the early 16th century, an artist who is not well known by the name of Savaldo played with a bright pink hue in his paintings, and he was very successful in putting that onto paper to make it look absolutely brilliant. Earlier in the 15th century, of course, the development of the printing press also allowed pink to be added to paper, and certain writers actually favoured pink paper for their printing because it made the images less stark. As well as that, pink glass in this particular era was always referred to as pale purple. By the 18th century, pink became extremely popular, and this was mainly due to the influence of Madame Pompadour, who had pink as one of her favourite colours. Here we have an image of one of the dresses that she was rather fond of wearing, and the pink that she preferred became known as Pompadour pink and was used extensively in the decoration of various different artifacts of the time. As well as this, there was a man by the name of Charles Joseph de Ligne, who was known as the Pink Prince. He also favoured a very, very bright pink, and most of his garments were this colour. By this stage, it was also possible to dye silk with the colour pink, and of course, its glossiness contributed to its popularity. In India, Jaipur has a pink palace, and in fact, the whole township is known as the Pink City because of the prevalence of pink in its architecture. When we come into the 19th century, we have a development which allowed for synthetic dyes and pigments to expand the range of pinks that were available. It was a common colour to be used for both girls and boys, and for boys in particular, it was considered to be rather manly in that it was a rendition of red. It was, however, degraded as a colour of debauchery and prostitution by the mid-19th century, and as a result of this, pink was relegated to the use in underwear rather than outerwear. The artist Degas used pink as an experimental colour in some of his paintings of ballerinas, and a lot of his ballerinas actually use pink and orange as a main hue. But one of the interesting things about the colour pink is that it came through folklore about babies, cabbage patches versus roses. The ubiquitous Cabbage Patch doll arose from the idea of those folklore messages that little boys were grown in cabbage patches, whereas girls were grown in roses. And so we have the start of this differentiation of babies into different colours, and pink began to be associated primarily with female babies. In the early 20th century, with the rise of fascism in Europe, pink became a very important colour because it changed in favour. It was very much derided. The pink triangle was foisted upon people designated homosexual as a way of identifying them and allowing them to be publicly vilified. By the late 20th century, this same image, now inverted, but nevertheless still a pink triangle, to indicate that these people were not only prepared to adopt a symbol of prior degradation, but now adopted it as a notion of identity for themselves. Pink continued to be quite influential in women's fashion. Mamie Eisenhower wore pink to her husband's inauguration in America, and Jackie Kennedy was also associated with the colour pink in a rather famous suit that she wore. Across the ocean, Princess Diana wore pink quite frequently, and this particular gown was one prior to her wedding. As well as that, we see Princess Catherine now also adopting pink on occasion. In haute couture, It also continues to be a colour by both female and male models. And in contemporary fashion, pink continues as both streetwear and exercise wear, and has reached the stage where it is now quite popular amongst both males and females as a shoe. In Eastern traditions, the symbolism is different. For Japan, pink is associated with the cherry blossom season, and it is therefore linked to the transience of life, and males will often use pink as a dress-up colour, and it was traditionally attached to the warrior status. In Thailand, pink is associated with Tuesday-born children, and it's also associated with the Songkran festival, where lots of pink is thrown around for remembrance, respect, and luck. In Korea, pink balances style and pride. The Pink Spiders, a volleyball team, were very successful despite wearing the colour pink, which was quite novel at their time. And there is also an area in Korea where trees are highlighted in pink light to give the impression of a place where trust, reliability, and youth can be found. In India, pink is one of the key colours for Lakshmi, as mentioned previously, but also for the Holi festival. And many images of Lakshmi are associated with the pink lotus as the flower from which she springs. Basically, pink is designated as the colour for victory of good over evil, and it's also the start of spring. It indicates femininity and elegance, compassion, love, and harmony. But it's also associated with male strength and steadfastness, and so is popular among both men and women within the Indian culture. In China, pink itself as a colour had many complex meanings over time. It was associated as an auspicious colour with beauty, gentleness, sweetness, and cuteness associated with it. Love, friendship, gratitude, innocence, and fantasies are all attributes that are associated with this colour. It is often used for formal celebrations such as weddings and also for the new year, but it's considered to be a poor choice for bedrooms because it is thought to be the cause of quarrels when overused. In Iran, pink is a prominent colour in both fashion and decor. Persian rugs often contain a large amount of pink. It's considered to be associated with elegance, tranquility, sophistication, and luxury. Here we have the Persian silk flower in a bonsai form. But pink, apart from being a traditional colour, is also prominent in the use by royalty and also in other spiritual contexts. Symbolism in the West has been taken over by consumerism and marketing. Pink is used very rarely in major items because it is so highly visible. But marketing began to gender Western society through the use of pink. But the mass production of goods, which began after World War II, standardized this colour reversal as being pink for girls and blue for boys. If we have a look at the Barbie phenomenon, for example, here in 1955, shortly after the Second World War, Barbie was not necessarily associated with pink. By 1975, that association had started to take root. By 1995, it was well and truly established. And in fact, an entire Barbie phenomenon arose. But this cultural establishment of the colour pink for girls in the 1990s started to go overboard, with entire shops devoting pink items for girls and blue items for boys, so that children were trained very early on not to play with the alternative gendered items. there is a lot of unnecessary gendering taking place. For example, here we have coloured pencils. Then we have Kinder Surprise, chocolate eggs, earplugs of all things. Or how about glue just for girls? Or maybe a lady's hammer, sellotape. And then we have here marshmallow, women and men's tea, chick beer. But perhaps the most insidious of all is the blue marketed laptop has twice as many features as the pink marketed laptop. Is this to indicate girls can't manage 50 functions? There is a trend that is gradually challenging this, and that is that men's sport is gradually taking on the colour pink because it is so highly visible and they take pride in the colour as part of their uniforms. Although millennial pink, which is much softer than the pinks that we normally had seen in colour swatches, has taken over in recent years as a way of marking femininity. Pink has also been used in Western symbolism as a control mechanism. There was an observed effect of pink on Japanese prisoners, and as a result of those observations, female prisons and female prison uniforms were created pink, ostensibly to relieve the oppression of imprisonment for those offenders. However, in the West, there was a comparison of the psychological effects of pink and blue. They discovered that pink reduces blood pressure and it also reduces pulse rate, so therefore it is less wearing on the heart. Prisons began to paint the walls of the various cells in pink. Aggressive prisoners were also put into pink items. And the result was there was a degree of reduced hostility and belligerence amongst those prisoners. And so later on, that same thinking was also applied to sports, in which visiting team restrooms and urinals in particular in the US were painted pink. There is a lot of evidence around, and it is increasing, that the colour pink, when you are surrounded by it, actually helps to weaken an individual. So let's now have a look at the positive pink effects. As a mood enhancer, pink promotes feelings of warmth and comfort, and it can calm and reduce anger. It has links to kindness and love and caring and softness, and it evokes a soothing, compassionate feeling that supports resilience in tough times. It also promotes hope, social awareness, and empathy. It permits self-expression, and it gives a sense of boldness, depending, of course, on the hue. As well as this, it also has a universal symbolism. It's fashionable as versatile and stylish, regardless of the culture. It appeals to diverse tastes, and it can lead from playful pinks through to sophisticated pinks, from romantic to optimistic uses, and it has a crucial role in health campaigns, specifically for the breast cancer campaign. On the other hand, there are also a number of negative effects of pink. These are mainly dependent on the strength of the pink and the shade in which it appears. Darker pink tends to symbolize rebellion and the breaking of norms, whereas a lighter pink is used as a way of indicating someone who needs or is seeking emotional security. It may promote vulnerability, timidity, weakness, avoidance of reality, and it can be emotionally draining to be around it. I'd be interested to see how you are finding the effects of this particular presentation, considering that I've chosen a deliberately strong pink as the background colour. It also encourages passivity and dependence. It permits immodesty and lustfulness, and there is a tendency in the use of pink towards childishness, tantrums, and being overly emotional. But also a detrimental effect is the stereotyping that goes along with pink. It reinforces traditional gender roles and leads to gender-based assumptions about people And those gender-based assumptions can appear very patronizing in the way in which pink is used in environments, particularly in work environments. So what then are the images that we have of pink? In terms of positive images, we have pink as being romantic and feminine and playful and innocent and young, optimistic, kind and healthy. The negative attributes are passivity, inexperience, timidity, being overly emotional, unrealistic, inhibited, shy, and immature. And these ideas are carried through into the pink idioms that we use. For example, tickled pink means to be happy. Being in the pink means being in good health. But a pink elephant or seeing pink elephants means that you are suffering from intoxication and hallucinations. A pinky finger is the smallest finger on a human hand, whereas the pink slip in the United States is an indicator that your employment has been terminated, whereas in Australia, particularly in New South Wales, it is a roadworthiness certificate for your vehicle. A pinky promise is a serious promise. A pink collar is a class of jobs that is dominated by women. A pink haze is emotionally clouded thinking, whereas a pink cloud is a temporary happy or dreamy state. And then if we see pink stars, it means we're feeling dizzy or shocked. A pink fit is a sudden angry outburst. And pink eye is an infection or inflammation of the conjunctiva of the eye. So in summary then, pink does not appear on any colour wheel. It's the most recent basic colour term in the English language, and it has a fairly limited art history, regardless of the culture in which we look. Its cultural uses move in and out of favour, and its effect weakens us physically. Its psychological effects depend on the shade and intensity of the hue that we are using. So that brings us to the end of our introduction to the colour pink. In about a month, I'll be looking at the pink personality in detail. I've left it to fairly late because it is a very anomalous personality type, much more difficult to pin down than some of the others that we are used to seeing. So hopefully you'll be around to join me for that one. In the meantime, if you have any comments to make, anything you'd like to add to what I've presented here, please do so in the comments below. And hopefully, if you are one of those people who really loves pink, that it does bring you the joy and the comfort that pink tends to suggest is good for us. Until next time, bye.